morning, everybody, and it really is a pleasure to be here this morning. Dr. Green, as many of us know, is a leading advocate for open licensing policies that ensure publicly funded educational materials are freely and openly available. Dr. Green helps lead the open education movement globally and is the director of open education at Creative Commons, a nonprofit organization at the center of an international movement to promote sharing of creativity and of knowledge. Creative Commons, as many of you in the room know, provides the well-known suite of open licenses that have become the global standard used by governments, institutions, and individuals across culture, education, and science to promote sharing, collaboration, and innovation. There are a lot of licenses out there. The count, as far as my notes go over here, says there are 1.2 billion in use across 9 million websites, and for those of us who use them, we know that it's provided a very necessary service for being able to share open content. Dr. Green has 20 years of academic technology experience, online learning, and open education experience, and helped establish the Open Course Library, which provides OER and low-cost materials. I was actually in there today looking at Composition 2, which my wife teaches online. Great resources there, and that is over 80 high-enrolled courses and wonderful content available. So it's a pleasure, and please give a big Florida welcome to Dr. Cable Green.
Good morning. You can do better than that. Good morning. So it's nice to be here. I've never been to Pensacola before. I'm enjoying it. I haven't been to the beach yet, but like he said, it's raining, so we'll stay inside today. It's supposed to be nice tomorrow, though, so I apologize to all the speakers who are speaking tomorrow. So part of my role this morning is to not only welcome you to the conference, but to set the stage for open education, to give you a taste of what's happening in the country and around the world, and to get some of the core concepts out of the way so that our other speakers throughout the conference can dive deep on particular topics. So we've tried to organize it in that way. So mine will be very much of a landscape look at open education. In the Open Ed movement, we try, whenever possible, to remix work that we already have. And when we do that, we give attribution to others. And so I'd like to thank my friend David Wiley, because this presentation is a remix of a talk that David and I did in Maryland recently, just a few weeks ago. And so it would be wrong of me not to give proper credit. And that, of course, leads to this, which is all of these slides are openly licensed, so you will all get a copy of these, downloadable, editable file, so that you can remix and reuse these as you see fit as well. And if you don't know what this means, you certainly will by the end of today's talk. So I like to always start by saying, why are we here? Why are we talking about this? Well, we are all educators. My background is an educator as well. I used to be faculty at Ohio State University, not the Ohio State University, just Ohio State University. And education is about sharing, right? When we teach, when we engage with our students, with our doctoral students, with our fellow faculty, we're sharing. We're sharing ideas. We're sharing knowledge. When we publish, we're sharing our research. We're pushing science forward. This is fundamentally what the academy is about. If we're not sharing, we're not teaching. We're not educating. And what's exciting today is that we can share with unprecedented capacity. And why is that? Well, we've got things in the past decade plus, really about the last 15 years, that we never had before in human history. We have the internet, we have cheap disk space for storage, and we have things being digital, and I'll get to open licensing in a minute. So what digital gives us, and if you think about all the educational resources that you use in your classrooms, in your online, you may use paper, you probably have other media formats as well, but there's a digital back end to everything that we produce. And what's interesting about digital is you can store, copy, and distribute digital things for near zero cost. So the production of digital things, still very expensive. The maintenance of digital educational resources, also very expensive. But the rest of the supply chain, storing those digital things, making copies of them, and distributing them. Those parts of the supply chain used to be very expensive. When something goes digital, they fall to almost zero. So to give you an example of that, just for fun, we took an OpenStax textbook, big, full color, with graphics textbook, uploaded it into Amazon's cloud. The storage costs for a month for that textbook were 0.000084 cents a month. And then every time somebody downloaded the book, it was 0.000072 cents. Right, so you're talking not even about thousandths of a cent, you're talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of a cent to store and distribute these works. And so that's different than when we had to print books for every student and store them in a warehouse and distribute them somewhere. So digital changes things. The internet also changes things. Once you've got these digital things, we can move them around the world at near speeds of light, and that's different. And then the third thing, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is open licensing, where we can share those digital things freely and legally. So before we move forward, let's talk a little bit about why this is important. And you're all in the business of education for your own reasons. I'm in the business of education because I fundamentally believe that education is what allows us to grow as individuals, to have the jobs and the careers and the lives that we want so that we can contribute to society in the way that we want to and take care of our families and our towns and our cities and our countries. I believe that if you're not educated, it's very difficult to fully participate in society as a citizen. And we know that there are many problems around the world that we're facing right now, everything from climate change. Well, here we're in Florida. You all should be worried about climate change. I was watching a video on the airplane of Florida streets being flooded, not from hurricanes, but just from rising tides. We've got refugee crises. We've got political crises. And there are many ways to solve these problems. I am a proponent that education is of the utmost importance if you want to put all hands on deck and solve major problems. We'll come back to this a little bit later about how the United Nations has framed this up and how education is part of it. So we can do all these amazing things. We can share digital, we can move it around the world at near speeds of light, we can share it legally, except that we can't. And we can't because there's this thing called copyright. And copyright is automatic, if you didn't know. Many people think that you have to register your copyright with the US Copyright Office. That's not true. The moment that I see many of you are scribbling down notes right now, those are actually automatically copyrighted. They're protected by the full force of copyright. They are all rights reserved. Nobody may do anything with them without your express permission. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. Those are your notes, it's your textbook that you wrote, it's your video that you created. Those rights should be protected. But digital and the internet and open licensing, all these wonderful things that we can do by sharing knowledge, by sharing research, that the internet enables, copyright forbids. And so David likes to say, it's like we're teaching with one hand tied behind our back. If teaching is about sharing, and if we can share, if we can copy, distribute, and share educational resources, textbooks, curriculum, and other resources at the marginal cost of zero, and we're not doing so, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. So in today's talk, I'm going to cover four major areas. We're going to talk about permissions, price, pedagogy, and policy. Hey, it's the 4 Ps. I didn't even notice that. Wiley's got the 5 Rs. I have the 4 Ps. So, common thing that comes up, people say, well, open must be the same as free. If I can get something for free on the internet, and a lot of things are free on the internet, isn't that good enough? Is that an open educational resource? Is that open? The answer is no. Open is not the same as free. Most of the content on the web is already free, but of course it could disappear tomorrow, or it could become a paid service. And you don't have the legal rights to alter it, to modify it, to make derivative works to meet your students' needs, because most of what you find on the internet is all rights reserved copyright. And if you do download it and make copies of it without express permissions, you're violating U.S. copyright law and could put yourself and your institution at risk. And that's not something that's helpful. So we say that open is different than free, precarious, rigid permissions that we have. Open means that we have the permissions, and specifically the legal permissions, and even more specifically, these 5 legal permissions. So for something to be open, for something to be an open educational resource, or many of us argue an open access journal, you must legally be able to retain a copy. That means nobody can take it away from you. Okay? Now there are many models I'll talk about in a minute which do take access away from you and your students. You have to be able to reuse it. So I have to be able to make a copy and use it as it is. I have to be able to revise it, change it to meet my students' needs. Remix it. Take a little bit of this from MIT OpenCourseware. I need to be able to go to Merlot, to Jerry's repository, and pull some content out of there and remix it together to create something new. And then redistribute. Education's about sharing. I'm going to take this new modified educational resource, which is perfect for my class, and share it with every other school in Florida. Maybe I re-upload it into Merlot as a new version. So retain is a prerequisite. If you don't have a copy, if you're not allowed to keep a copy, you can't revise or remix, right? If you take my copy of the book away from me, then I can't modify it in the future. That make sense? The reason you should pay attention to this is there are new models from commercial publishers, and apologies to the publishers who are in the room. They have some of these models, but we're going to talk about them. And that is, I call them artificial scarcity models. The names that are often used are inclusive access or digital discount. So one of the things that OER provides, Open Educational Resources, is day one access to students. Right, here's a copy of all the education content. The teachers may modify it. You've got all the legal rights. You can make copies for free. You can distribute it, etc. And that's a good thing. Everybody's got access on day one. Why do we care about day one access? Because traditionally, many students either didn't buy the educational resources or they had to wait for a financial aid check, and they didn't have day one. They had day 14 access to the resources. So day one access is really critical when you're talking about student success. Some of these new models which are emerging are essentially lease, not buy models. So it used to be that you bought an expensive textbook or educational resources and then you either kept it or you sold it back to the bookstore at a later date at 10 cents on the dollar, but you had an opportunity to own it and keep it. The new digital models tend to be lease models. So you pay a certain amount of money for the semester or for the year. And when you stop paying your lease fee, you lose access. You lose retain. Right? And if you don't have retain, you can't revise or remix. So we talked about internet, we talked about digital. Let's talk about the third leg of the stool, which is open licensing. And this is where I work at Creative Commons. We're a nonprofit organization. We create the open copyright licenses that the world uses. We're getting old. We're 17 years old now. I'm getting old too. We operate worldwide. We've got teams in 89 countries, and we exist for this reason. Because before Creative Commons, there were kind of two extremes. There was public domain, and there was all rights reserved for copyright. Librarians in the room, put your hands up. Oh, wow. That's awesome. By the way, librarians are like the best people on the planet. Give it up for the librarians. So somebody from the library community, shout out, how does something get from copyright, if you're in the United States, get from copyright to public domain? What are the two things that have to happen? Age, but before, what has to happen first?
A waiver.
A waiver? You can use a waiver to get there, but I'm looking for something a little bit more macabre.
Death.
Death, thank you. So if my work is going to go into the public domain, just by itself, point one, I have to die. Second thing that has to happen after my death is 70 years have to go by. Okay? If you're unfortunate enough to be in Mexico, you have to die and wait 100 years. I don't know why Mexicans have to wait an extra 30 years, but that's the way it is. And so to get something into the public domain where you've got all rights to use it as you want to in your classroom, we're all going to have to die, 70 years will have to go by, and then people can use your educational resources. And I don't know about you, but I wanted to share on Tuesday and not 70 years after my death. The other extreme is all rights reserved copyright, which is you can't use anything of mine without my express permission. And the way I give permission is I give you a license. So in the same way that J.K. Rowling has Harry Potter series and Warner Brothers wants to make a movie, her lawyers write a license to Warner Brothers so they can make a movie. And that's the way that, but licensing was usually one-on-one, right? License between you and me. What happens when I want to license to the world a set of rights to use my work under specific conditions? That didn't exist. That's Creative Commons. Creative Commons says, keep your copyright and put a license on your work so that the public may use it under the terms and conditions that you choose. These are the terms and conditions that you can choose from. The first one is not optional. The first one's called attribution. That means that if you use somebody's work, you have to give them credit. You have to say what the title is, the source, the author, and the license. We're already used to this. This is called citations. If we don't cite in the academy, we call it plagiarism, which is a bit of a problem for us, right? And so this is not a problem for the work that we all do. The other three are optional. Share alike says if you modify my work, you must share your new version or your changed version under the same terms that I shared my work under. That's Wikipedia. Everything in Wikipedia is under an attribution share alike license. Non-commercial says you can use my work, but you can't charge money for my work. So here it is, but you can't charge $15 for it on the web. Okay? And then no derivatives means you may use my work for free, you can make copies, you can distribute it, but you can't change it. Okay, you can't modify it. There is a slight caveat there. You can modify it for personal use, but you can't share that with anybody else. So it kind of takes the modification out of it. When you mix and match these different conditions, you get one of 6 Creative Commons licenses. You've probably seen these around the web. And when we think about the licenses in terms of education, it looks like this. And you can see some of these are OER compliant, and some of them are not. So if you start at the top, you've got the most freedom. So this is not about free. None of these licenses cost anything. They're freely available. They always will be. And to make sure of that, Creative Commons has dedicated all of our licenses and legal code to the public domain. So if we went away tomorrow, all this stuff is still there. Somebody said a minute ago, how do you get something into the public domain? And he said, dedicated. We do have a tool that does that. It's called CC0. So you can give up your copyright if you want to, use CC0, and dedicate your work to the public domain right now. Most educators use one of the licenses. They'll keep their copyright and they'll add a license. The reason that the CC BY license is at the top for the most free is it's the least restrictive. So think about these licenses in terms of downstream use. If I share my work, what kind of permissions, how many degrees of freedom, how much flexibility am I giving to other educators around the world? And any of these licenses in the green meet OER definitions. Because what OER says is you must have free access and you have to be able to change it. The reason the 2 no derivatives licenses don't meet OER is that you can't change them. Right? You can't modify the works. So in education, we try to stay away from the ND licenses. And in fact, if something has an ND license on it, we draw the line and we say that's not OER. So we like to say that we put the open in OER and in open access, and we're proud of that. As was said earlier, there's a lot of licenses out there. This data is out of date. We're running our new State of the Commons annual report right now. Google just dumped all the data on us. I expect this number will be much higher when we publish in a few months. CC licenses are not temporary permissions. These are permanent, irrevocable permissions. When somebody puts a CC license on their work, that work is openly licensed until the copyright expires and the work goes into the public domain. Why should you care about that? Because if you take somebody else's OER and you put it in your course, you put it in your degree program, nobody can yank it out, right? Nobody can reach in and say, nope, I don't want to share anymore, and leave a big hole in your course or degree. These licenses are irrevocable. And it's that aspect which makes people love Creative Commons. Okay, moving on. To be very, very specific, when we're talking about open educational resources, when we're talking about educational resources, it's all the stuff that we're using in the classroom. And to re-emphasize, when we're talking about open educational resources, you have to have the permissions to engage in those 5R activities, which 9 times out of 10 means it's either in the public domain or it has one of those 4 Creative Commons licenses on it. Okay? So if you see something that's not in the public domain, or it doesn't have one of those 4 CC licenses, you should really be questioning whether or not you've got the legal rights to modify it. Now, what this enables us to do is have different conversations about price and different conversations about pedagogy and practices. When we choose traditionally copyrighted materials, so raise your hand if you have traditionally copyrighted materials that you're assigning to your students and they're buying in the bookstore right now. It's okay, don't be ashamed, put your hand up, right? We've all done it. Okay, but remember this, right? We're actually locking down what we're able to do, how we're able to share. Whoops. No, I don't want to send. Not a problem, there's a quick recovery. All right. Lesson learned, don't lean on laptop. Okay. When we choose open educational resources, what the internet is enabling, what digital enables, what open licensing enables, right, that makes new things possible. So let's move on. Let's move from permissions. Let's start talking about price. Anybody know what this chart is? This is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it looks from 2006 until 2016. So you're looking at a decade of data here. And that bottom dotted line is the consumer price index. The other lines are things like the cost of tuition. That's the blue line, the second one from the top. Guess what that top yellow line is? The cost of textbooks, right. And over that decade period, the cost of textbooks from 2006 to 2016 went up 88%. The College Board tells us, this number varies from year to year, that books and supplies, so it's not just textbooks, but books and supplies, roughly $1,200 a year. This varies by what degree program students are in. If you're pre-med or you're in engineering or my wife went to vet school, the number is significantly higher. This is having a very negative effect on students. And my colleague Ethan Senek and his team put together reports like this from the US PIRGs. When textbooks and other curricular materials are expensive and they're required in the class and students have to buy them, bad things happen. The first one is that roughly 2/3 of students decide that they're not going to buy the book, and mainly because they're too expensive. Half of students say that the cost of textbooks impacted how many and which classes they took. Now, there's two ideas here. I was going to take 3 classes, but because the textbooks are expensive, now I don't have enough money for 3 classes worth of tuition, so I'm only going to take 2. And what is that doing? That's slowing down my time to degree. That's slowing down me getting my certificate. It's slowing me down getting my promotion that I'm trying to secure. So this is a major problem. It's also affecting which classes they're taking. So when students are interviewed, they'll say things like, you know, I really wanted to be a nurse because there's a nursing shortage and the Department of Labor says we need more nurses because baby boomers are retiring en masse now. The problem is the nursing curriculum and the textbooks, et cetera, are brutally expensive, and so I guess I can't be a nurse, right? Also a problem. And students aren't stupid. Students say, you know what? If the textbooks were less expensive or free, I would do better. Why? Because when I have all the educational resources that were designed for me to be successful in my class, I do better than when I don't have the educational resources. Okay, so this is fundamentally an equity question. We have many equity issues in this country. Our wealth continues to go like this, right, in this country and around the world. And the students that are coming to your doorstep, to your community colleges and to your universities are struggling economically. Their families, many of them are struggling. Student debt continues to rise. I think we just passed $1.4 trillion in student debt. The average for student debt out of a bachelor's degree now is over $27,000. This is slowing down all sorts of things like buying cars, getting a house, starting their lives. Big problem. Okay? This is an equity issue. When you use open educational resources, all students, not just your wealthy students or the students who make the choices to buy the materials, everybody has access to high quality educational resources on day one that the teachers and the professors can modify to meet their particular needs. Now, I'm not going to go deep into OpenStax because OpenStax is actually here. It'll be giving a talk later. But they put out a report recently with some really impressive numbers that I wanted to share. And that is just this year, in 2018, the projections are that 1.5 million students will be using OpenStax textbooks, saving approximately $145 million just in the United States. And they operate globally. Okay, this is double their student savings. Look at the growth of the students over the years using OpenStax textbooks. Why? Because it's obvious. OpenStax creates high-quality, effective books for the highest enrolled courses that every community college and every university in the world teach. Right? If you haven't seen it, take a look at OpenStax. And by the way, they're all under a Creative Commons attribution license, so you can modify them to meet your needs. Let me talk very quickly about K-12. And forgive me if I get a little riled up about this one, because my wife and I have 2 young kids in public schools, and I get upset when my children come home and the copyright date on their educational materials is a decade or more out of date. One solution several of us started a few years ago is called Open Up Resources. And this is a nonprofit organization which is building CC BY licensed OER for K-12. Now they're starting with math and English language arts, and they'll finish those grades, and then they'll branch out to other subjects in K-12. The reason I bring them up is oftentimes people point at OER and say, oh, it's OER, it's free. Must be garbage. You get what you pay for, right? If it's free, it can't be any good. Well, and we hear this all the time from all different angles. EdReports is a third-party, nonprofit reviewer of K-12 curriculum, and specifically curriculum that's supposed to be aligned to the Common Core state standards. They've reviewed many curriculum from different publishers. They just pointed their lens at Open Up Resources. Okay, all this content is CC BY license, it's all freely available. Open Up Resources got higher scores than any publisher that's ever been reviewed by EdReports. Okay? It was the best. They missed 1 point on the scoring system. And because it's OER, guess what they're going to do with that 1 point? Right? It can be fixed, and it can be fixed quickly. If you want to get a sense of price and what can happen in terms of cost savings for your students, Lumens got a really nice something they call, it's at impact.lumenlearning.com. It's called the OER Adoption Impact something. I call it the calculator. I call it the textbook calculator. But you can go in and say, here's how much my textbooks cost now that I'm assigning my students. Here's how much OER would cost. Maybe that number is 0. Maybe that number is $15 because students want to buy printed copies in your bookstore. Maybe it's $30 because you ordered a slate of books from OpenStax. But you can plug in your numbers, and you can also plug in other metrics, and you can get a sense of what does it cost now, and what will it cost when I move to OER. And not only that, but some student success data as well. One of the phenomena right now sweeping this country, starting to go across Canada, we're seeing it in the UK, is the idea of Z degrees. And this was actually coined by my colleague here, Daniel, in the audience, a speaker later. He's going to talk in great detail about this. But the idea is an entire degree program that is OER, where all of the content, all the textbooks are freely and openly available, and the content is open as well. And so we're not just talking about a textbook for a course, or even just one course. We're starting to build entire degree programs. And I hope Jerry talks about skillscommons.org. The U.S. Department of Labor put $2 billion into this idea a few years ago for community colleges to build entire degree programs. So that's OER, and it's not all you're going to use in your colleges. Even when we're wildly successful, you're still going to use a mix of different materials. So the librarians in the room know that a lot of what the library has they pay lease fees, they pay subscription fees to amazing resources. Now those are freely available to students and faculty, and so students and faculty should use those. They should take advantage of them. But we would say, they're not OER because you don't have the permissions to revise and remix them. That's okay. Everything doesn't have to be OER. Where there are gaps that we don't have in OER, it makes sense to have subscription models from the library. We should leverage those. Well, we should do that in a smart way, and there's lots of different library alliances that do that. When we're looking at commercial resources, we need to recognize that not only are they expensive, but we don't have the 5 R's permissions on those. And then with OER, we get both. So we're going to have a mix of these 3 things in the end. So we talked about permissions and price. Let's talk a bit about pedagogy. So we're talking about pedagogy, or some people call it open education practices. The question here is, what can I do with my students, with my learning design, in my classroom, when the content is open and when the processes are open? Maybe the syllabus is slightly open and modifiable. What can I do when things are open that I can't do when things are closed? So David calls this OER-enabled pedagogy because for him, he's a faculty member as well, you can't do these open things unless you can't have the open practices unless the content is open. Because part of what you're doing with open practices is you're having your students engage with the content, update the content, modify it, remix it. And you can't do that unless the content is openly licensed or in the public domain. So he kind of walks through this list. People learn when we do things. We know this from EdPsych research for the last 50 years. We know that copyright restricts what people can do, and therefore copyright's restricting how we can do things and how we learn. And if open removes these restrictions, then open's going to allow us to learn in new ways. So he talks about disposable assignments. So faculty, put your hands up. Keep your hands up. If you've ever given students an assignment, they did the assignment, they turned it into you graded it, and then they threw it away and you threw it away. Put your hands up. On my hands up, I've done this. Right? Now think about that for a minute. So full disclosure, my doctorate's in education psychology. I study how people learn, that's my interest. I can tell you that when that is the assignment, it is not motivating. 2 things that help people learn. 1, motivation. 2, if you're giving them authentic tasks. Okay, if you're actually giving them something that matters and they can recognize how it fits into their professional or personal lives or their community. Okay, if it doesn't have those 2 elements, you're in big trouble. If you're giving them disposable assignments, right? Students hate them, faculty hate grading them, and it's a missed opportunity, and here's why. Just back of the napkin, just undergraduates in public institutions. This doesn't even include calculations of community college students, which we know is a full 1/2 of undergraduates in the United States. 40 million hours a year of students' brain power is going into doing assignments. This is a very conservative estimate. Folks, we've got big problems in the world that need solving. We've got poverty, we've got income equity, we've still got, we have refugee crises, we've got global warming. There's lots of things that we could put 40 million hours, actually this is probably double, of brain power into solving, right? And you put students into environments where they were actually doing something that matters. Let me give you an example. One of our sons is in the 7th grade. His name's Nate. And Nate comes home the other day and I said, how was school? Usually he goes, oh, it's fine. And he doesn't tell me anything. One day he came home, he says, Dad, school was great. And I said, what'd you do? He says, today we saved salmon. I said, I don't know what that means. But you have to understand, I live in the Northwest. We hug trees, we hug bears, and we save salmon. This is what we do in Olympia, Washington. And I said, what do you mean you saved salmon? He said, well, we put hip waders on, we went out in the stream, because the salmon come up these headwaters to spawn, and we were taking water samples, and then we went back to the lab, and we put it underneath, we were looking for microbes and pollution, and then we collected the data, and we did some statistics, and we submitted all of our data to the state EPA, because they don't have enough staff to go out into the streams and collect this data. And I said, wow, it sounds like you were learning a little bit of statistics and some biology and chemistry. And he said, yeah, I was saving salmon. And I said, that's a very smart teacher, right? And what he was doing is he was doing something that he saw value in. Yes, he was learning stats and chemistry and biology, but he was doing it in the context of something that actually mattered to him. He could relate to the fish, and he could see his work, and he was out in the field. Not only that, his work didn't get thrown in the garbage can. His work was submitted to the State Environmental Protection Agency, who's going to use that data to make policy decisions about new, and in fact, this just happened in my state and in Oregon. I'm looking at my friend Amy over there. There was a big new rail line which was going to bring oil into a port in Vancouver, Washington, and our governor just canceled that because the state EPA said no. And so I went back to my kids and I said, part of your work of saving salmon contributed to that policy decision, right? Everybody wants to do work that they feel that matters. And when I'm rattling off big things around the world, this isn't just cable being at 100,000 feet. The United Nations actually has spec'd out, and every country in the world, including ours, has signed on to these SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So you'll see that number 4 is everybody in the world should have a quality education. So if we start to think about our education as being about solving the big goals, and if that's what you want, you better have open content in your classrooms if this is what you're working on. Because if you want your students to contribute to these problems, to share these ideas with other students around the world, if you want to share with other faculty around the world, and you don't have the legal rights to do so, you don't get to play in this game. Okay? It's a different way of thinking. Last P, we'll talk about policy. I'm going to jump right to it. Publicly funded resources should be openly licensed. The public should get access to what the public pays for. Full stop. There's no excuse not to provide the public access to what the public pays for. Now, big surprise, today you don't. Okay, for the most part, the way that research is funded in the United States and in China and Brazil and the European Union, those are the major, in Canada, those are the major funders of research. The default for a long time was that the public paid taxes, the governments funded research, the research was done by faculty and scholars, that copyright got turned over to publishers, companies like Elsevier and others, and they lost their copyright, and then librarians, what did you have to do? Pay! They said, librarians are pissed off. They had to subscribe to these journals, and it costs a lot of money to subscribe to these journals to get access to research that their faculty did, that the public paid for, and that their faculty also served on the peer review boards and got no pay for doing that because it's quote-unquote part of their responsibility of being in the academy. It's the biggest boondoggle in the history of the academy. Now, the good news is that the open access movement is starting to undo that by requiring that publicly funded resources should be openly licensed. So I'm not just talking about educational resources. I'm talking about all of the research we do. I'm talking about all of the government data that's produced with our taxpayer money. It should be openly licensed or put directly into the public domain. Now, the good news is that the money is starting to shift to open. Robin, how am I doing on time?
You're fine. 20 minutes.
20 minutes, good. We're in good shape. The money's shifting to open. So in the U.S. federal government, there is an executive order that's in place that says that, and we're working on legislation right now, that says that if you are a federal agency and you give out research money, that the article after 12 months, being in publication for 12 months, the public must be able to get read access to it. So I have to be able to read it somewhere on the web. Probably I can download a copy as well. So that's good. That's a good first step. There's two major problems there. One is that I had to wait 12 months. I'm the public. I paid for it. Why do I have to wait 12 months to read the research? Why can only rich universities afford to read the research today? That doesn't make a lot of sense. The other problem with it is it's read-only access. So anybody in here publish articles? Several people? Good. So think about what we do with articles today is you publish them, and they go into a journal, and then somebody reads the article. What happens if somebody wants to get access to your data and replicate your study? They have to reach out to the scholar, and they have to say, pretty please, may I have access to your data? And I'll tell you, usually the answer is no. Right? No, it's my data. I'm going to publish more. I don't want to be scooped. Public paid for that data too. Okay, but the answer tends to be no. Second thing that happens is I had to wait 12 months, so that's a problem. The other thing that happens is I can't do what's called text and data mining. So let's pretend I went back and was faculty again in education psychology, and I wanted to do some research, maybe a meta-analysis. And I wanted to analyze 100,000 articles of EdSite research because I have been in the field for a while. How in the world am I going to read 100,000 articles? As a human being, not possible. But what I can do is I can create a little program, and these programs exist, where I can go out and do pattern recognition and bring back results from 100,000 articles using my computer. But when I do that, I'm making copies of those articles, I'm making derivative works of some of those articles, and I'm implicating copyright in the process. And if all of those articles are all rights reserved copyright, I just violated copyright not once, but 100,000 times. It's not going to work. Right? This is especially important when you get into things like genomic research or particle physics or areas where you're actually looking at particular variables across a slew of articles. The next wave of research requires that researchers be able to do what's called text and data mining. In order to do that, they've got to have access to the data, and they've got to have access, not just read access, but rewrite access and remix access to the articles. This doesn't mean they're going to rewrite the research. It means they have to be able to pull from it and do those remixes for their analysis. Okay? I know that sounds weird, but that's where we're headed. And so the Gates Foundation recently came out and worked with us and Spark and several others and said, what would a model open access policy look like? And what they did was they said, from now on, if you take money from Gates and you do research, they fund a lot of the global health research. 0 embargo period. The moment it's published, the whole world gets access. So that's good. Full access to the data. So you've got to make your data sets available. And full access to the articles. You have to be able to do text and data mining. Right? That's what we're trying to get governments and other foundations to do. Okay, what this looks like for most grants, especially education grants, is what the Hewlett Foundation does, which is if you take our money, you'll put a CC BY license on your work. And if you don't like those terms, don't take our money. U.S. Department of Labor says exactly the same thing. Here's $5 billion a year of grants that we put out. It's all public money. If you want to take Department of Labor money, you will put a CC BY license on it. If you don't like those terms, don't take the money. Nobody's forcing anybody to take the money. These are optional, discretionary grants. Why are they requiring a CC BY license? Well, the reason the Department of Labor does it is that they accepted the argument that the public should have access to what the public paid for. The reason they chose the CC BY license is that it's the least restrictive and you can remix it with the most stuff. So I can take whatever is coming out of a Department of Labor grant and I can remix it with anything in Merlot in Jerry's repository because the CC BY license will remix with it. Why do you care about this? Because you can have these same open policies at your institution, at your system office. We worked with, anybody here from California? Jerry's from California. I love you, Jerry. You're such a great guy. So several of us worked in California with the Chancellor's office with the community colleges. And the Chancellor's office had a real problem. And they said, gosh, today we give out tens of millions of dollars a year in optional discretionary grants to California community colleges. And sometimes we want to build a new degree program over here, or sometimes it's new LibGuides at a library over here, or, we build all sorts of things in grants. But the problem is today we give the grant to one community college, and then they have all rights reserved copyright. And even though they're supposed to share with all the other colleges in California, sometimes they don't. And not only that, but gosh, because you could share at the marginal cost of zero, why isn't California sharing with Florida and with New York and with Oregon and Washington and everybody else that might want to use it? Because it doesn't cost California anything to take those materials and share them. Right? It costs very little to stick all that stuff in Merlot. Jerry's happy to host it, and other people around the world can use it. So what the community college office said was, from now on, CC BY license on everything you take. Right? So this is, you can kind of get the idea here. This is starting to roll. We're taking this a step further now. And so the idea of open licensing policies was always, if you take this optional discretionary money, then you have to share what you build. And those are pretty easy policies to get because nobody's forced to take optional discretionary money. Now let me stop for just a minute so that nobody gets confused. Creative Commons and none of my colleagues ever recommend, nor will we ever recommend, that, or I should speak for myself, I will never recommend that OER should be mandated. First of all, when you mandate OER, you just upset people and it's unnecessary. Secondly, you don't need to, because if you provide support for faculty, librarians, and others that want to go open, they'll go open all on their own and they'll do amazing, great things. And people that don't want to go open, don't worry about it. Either they'll come along at some point or they won't. It's no problem, right? We shouldn't get into forcing, everybody knows, you try to force faculty to do something, it's a world of hurt. It's not worth getting into. And I think it's the wrong thing to do. So I want to be very clear on that point. That being said, as we have worked with governments around the world on open licensing policies, many governments are starting to say, yeah, that's just a very small amount of the money we spend. So, for example, in the United States, the U.S. Department of Labor has a CC BY policy on their $4 or $5 billion a year of grants. And yes, $4 or $5 billion is a lot of money. But only some of their grants are on educational resources. In the U.S., there in K-12, the market is, and it changes every year, but it's somewhere between $6 and $9 billion every year K-12 public schools spend buying or leasing educational resources. In higher ed, it's somewhere between $8 and $11 billion a year. So we're talking about big money here. So some governments are coming to us and others and saying, how do we, as the stewards of taxpayer money, not just put open licensing requirements on optional money, how do we put it on the big money? And so we're starting to call this open procurement. And what I like to say is build or buy or commission what you need. So before you even get to this point, first, what OER is out there that I can use? So if I can use that OpenStax textbook for my Statistics 101 course, and I don't need to build it, great. I just saved myself a bunch of time and a bunch of money. If I need to revise that book to meet my needs, yeah, that takes a little time and a little money, but not a lot. And now I've got what I need for my course. But what if the OER doesn't exist, right? What if it's not there? And there's a lot of OER that there's big gaps, right? So how do we build as public universities, as public entities? How do we build or buy or commission, pay somebody else what we need? Make sure we own what we're buying, right? So if Ohio State University is going to put out an RFP for somebody to build Psych 101, Ohio State University should hold the copyright to that work. The copyright should not be held by Pearson Publishing, right? And then how do we share what we own? Put a CC license on it, right? Keep your copyright and share what we own. So buy what you need, own what you buy, and share what you own. And my friend David Ernst, who's sitting here in the audience from the Open Textbook Network, will talk in more depth about this idea. He's got a really great project going on with universities, which are starting to have this conversation. How do we build what we need for the academy and own it and share it? So what can universities and colleges do? You can raise awareness. You can have events like this at your institutions. You can have OER teams, open education teams at your institution. If you want to know more about how to put those teams together, grab one of us during a break. We'll help you out. College can support with release time, with stipends, with an OER librarian, the creation, adaptation, sharing, and adoption of OER. You can provide funding. You can go to your state legislature. You can go to your chancellor. There's different pots of money out there to support open education activities. And I've got in bold here, coordinate across the state and your system here in Florida, right? So don't try to do this alone. Get together with the colleges in Florida through this consortia and say, look, let's build together a nursing degree. And you do those 5 courses, we'll do these 5 courses, we'll do these 3. We'll coordinate our activities, we'll put a CC BY license on everything, and we'll share it with each other. Right? You can divide and conquer. And also don't try to do this alone. Amy's here from Open Oregon. She's got tremendous resources that they're creating up there. And they're more than happy to take everything they've got and give it to you for free under a CC license. In my state, they've got the Open Course Library. It's a whole general education curriculum. Take it. They want you to take it and use it. New York State produced the Engage New York curriculum for K-12. If your K-12 schools aren't looking at that, they should be. 85% of the districts in the country are already using it. You need to look at your promotion tenure policies. P&T should benefit, support, give points for faculty that are publishing in open access journals, and they should be giving supports for faculty who share their content under open licenses. Why? Because promotion tenure is about research, teaching, and service. And certainly when you publish an OA journals, you are supporting research. Why? Because everybody on the planet can read your research. Your reach and your impact is bigger. It's very clear cut. Teaching and service, if I'm sharing my Psych 101 course as OER, and I'm positively affecting 5 other professors in this state and 30 other professors around the world, and I've reduced student debt, and I'm increasing student outcomes, and I've dropped course dropout rates, and I'm reducing time to degree, those are all positive things that happen with OER, and I should be rewarded for that in promotion and tenure. You need to tag OER in your course catalogs. Amy's state is doing it, my state's doing it, Jerry's state is doing it, Texas is doing it. State legislatures are passing laws that say students need to have information when they're signing up for their courses, and if a course is built on OER, that's information the students want. No big surprise. I want to know which courses have 0 textbook costs, or that cost less than $30, or whatever metric you're using. Sustainability is a bigger topic than we've got to go in today, but I would beg you, don't let people drag you into a conversation about sustainability if they frame the conversation that your OER or your open education work is some on-the-side pilot, something you're just testing out. That's the wrong way to look at it. I believe the right way to look at it is that the existing systems that we have are fundamentally unsustainable. Right, so in my state, when we started building, I live in Washington State, we started building the open course library, we looked at our highest enrolled course. Our highest enrolled course was English Composition 1, English 101, basic writing course. This is just the community colleges. 62,000 students a year in Washington State take this course. We total up the cost of the curriculum materials, mainly the cost of the textbook. It was $8.3 million. Then we asked, where does that money come from? It was a third student debt, a third right out of the state general funds, and a third from the U.S. federal government in Pell Grants and other financial aid that you all paid for. Thank you, by the way. Right? So then we went to our state legislature and I said, did you know that you're spending $2.3 million a year on one book just for the community colleges, and 2/3 of the students aren't even buying the book because it's expensive? And they got mad. We said, good, we're glad that you're mad. Now give us some money so that we can go solve the problem. Right? And so if you actually do an analysis about how you're spending money now and the results you're getting for the money, you will be sorely disappointed. Okay, I get mad a lot. You can probably tell. I got mad because I go to PTA meetings. My wife, God bless her, worked on the PTA as a volunteer, and so I used to call it getting dragged to the meetings, and then I enjoyed going to the meetings after that. And I went to these PTA meetings, and I would do things like hold up, because you can tell I'm a lot of fun at PTA meetings. I'd hold up the textbook and I'd say, why are you giving my boys textbooks that are 10 years out of date? And they said, we can't afford to update. And so we started to investigate. We went to the state office, Department of Education. Turns out my state, small state by the way, population-wise, we only have 1 million public school kids. We spend $132 million a year just in Washington State buying curriculum for the 294 school districts. Okay? By the way, each district makes up their own decision which books they buy at what point. So I'm in Olympia. Our school district has an annual budget of $550,000 a year to buy textbooks. Sounds like a lot of money. I said to our curriculum director, with that budget, how many of the 100 curriculum cells, 12 grades, roughly 8 subjects per grade? It's about 100, give or take. Of those 100 cells, 6th grade biology, 10th grade math, 7th grade physics. Of those, how many can you update a year? And her answer was between 0 and 2. That's why your kids' books are 10 years out of date. $132 million a year we spend. You want to talk about sustainability problems? That's a problem. And so then people throw up their hands and say, well, gosh, that's some cost. We have procurement processes. What in the world could we do? I said, I don't know. How about thinking outside the box? We got 100 cells. Why don't we put out 100 $1 million RFPs? I'll bet you money I can get somebody to build 6th grade biology for $1 million. And I'll pay you a 25% maintenance contract. I'll give you $250,000 a year to get 6th grade biology to keep it updated. And the state of Washington will hold the copyright. Your work for hire. We'll pay you really well. And I'll pay you a maintenance contract to keep it updated. And now the state of Washington pays $100 million once, and we pay $25 million ongoing. And now the state owns everything. Everything's got a CC BY license on it. Every kid has up-to-date resources all the time, in print, and digital. I didn't tell you some of the other bad things. When my kids go from grade to grade, they take all their resources away. So my son came to me the other day and he says, Dad, I'm a little nervous. He's in a STEM program. I said, why are you nervous? He said, next year I have to take advanced algebra. I said, you'll be fine. You get good grades. And he said, yeah, but I'm taking algebra right now. And last year they took all my books away. And I'm worried that when they take my algebra books away, when I go into my next year's grade, I'll forget it. And I'm going to need to look back at my books, but the teacher said they don't have enough copies, so I can't. And so I'm trying really hard to write everything down in my notebook so that I will do well in advanced algebra. This is what we pay for. This costs my state $132 million a year. God forbid you are somebody who doesn't have any money. In these PTA meetings, so we're in the circuit of people from Latin America that come up and they pick our strawberries and our apples in Oregon and Washington, and they cycle around. This is a great thing. A lot of diversity in our schools. Kids hear students speaking different languages, Portuguese and Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese. Okay, this is good for my children's education. They're welcome into our communities. They're welcome into our schools. I sit in these PTA meetings and I listen to parents when they've got the orientation materials because their kids are new. And there's a form they have to sign that says, if my kid loses their book, I, the parent, have to pay $150 to replace the book, or my kid's not allowed to graduate to the next grade. And so the parents tell their kids, don't take your books from home to school and back to do homework because we can't afford it if you lose your book. And if you lose your book, I don't know what we're going to do. And so you're going to have to make friends with a rich kid. I heard somebody in Spanish saying this next to me. Have to make friends with a rich kid so you can do your homework. That's what my state pays for. So you want to talk about sustainability? Let's do an ROI analysis on our existing systems and ask ourselves, are we being efficient? How many Spanish 101 courses is the state of Florida funding right now in this state? I don't know, but you should be asking those questions. Right? Are the Spanish 101 faculty working with each other? Are they sharing with each other? Are they collaborating? Last point. There's a place for you to join to have this conversation. At Creative Commons, we host something called the Open Education Platform. You are all welcome to join. We're almost 700 members now from around the world. And caveat here is we don't focus on small open ed projects. We're focused on global, multinational open ed issues and topics. So if there's something that 5-6 countries need, those are the projects we're doing. The good news is that what they need in Morocco for education, in terms of open ed resources, you probably need here in Florida as well. Everything we build is under a CC BY license. We share it openly. We stop there, and we've got just a few minutes for questions. Thank you. Oh, and I'm really behind on email, so that's my Twitter handle. I'm much faster replying on Twitter. If you send me a message. Questions? And I'm supposed to say that there's a mic here, or if you raise your hand, a runner can bring you a mic too. Yes?
Hi, I'm Marcia Palmer from Lisbon Community College. I really enjoyed your speech. I wonder if you could, talking back on making data available, I read in a study that we've lost a lot of data that was gathered in the past because of poor storage practices and how open access work that are holding researchers accountable for making that data.
So there are several solutions out there. Well, first of all, don't sit down yet. Come up here. We have a present for you. Grab one of those books right off the top and hold it up. That will encourage others to ask the next question. She won a Made with Creative Commons book. So. You're absolutely right. And I think this goes to a broader issue, which is we, the Academy, need to start to take back control and ownership of what we produce and the long time archiving of it. For too long, we have outsourced the production of our textbooks, in many cases our curriculum, our data storage, to other outside entities. And when those entities go away, if they go bankrupt or if the market decides they don't exist anymore for some reason, then sometimes we lose access to content or data. And so, again, this is something that I hope Dave will talk about later. That as the academy is starting to say we need to own stuff. We need to own the repositories. We need to own, you got projects like Koali and others where they say we need to own the software. It used to be open source software that we're using for our ERP systems. Not sure we can count on PeopleSoft in the long term. We need to own the textbooks that we're using in our classes. We need to own and have full access to all the research we produce and the research data. Right? So not to say we shouldn't work with outside entities that may be commercial. We probably should. And it's probably a mix, as I said, of that. But we should always keep a copy. Right? So if I've learned over the years not to trust because markets change. And so always keep a copy. And I think it's a good time for the Academy to have a more robust discussion about this. I would hope that this would be a discussion at the American Association of Universities and at AACC and EDUCAUSE and others, where we start to say, look, what are the key assets that we have in education? Content, pedagogical practices, data, research, there's probably many others, library reserves. How do we take ownership of those and ensure long-term preservation? Yes, question in the back.
Hi, Dr. Green. I hope I can phrase this question right. If I were to say create something that they're getting access, I would have no problem following any of those requirements. But I think my concern would be if my works, how to preserve the integrity of my work. And in other words, if someone were to take my work and adapt it for some nefarious reasons, I guess. Is there a concern for that? Like the original work is then turned into something totally different and totally opposite of what you intended?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it comes up a lot. So there's two answers to it. One is that the CC licenses themselves have two protections built in for you, the author. And they're called the non-attribution and the non-endorsement clauses, and all of our licenses have them. So first of all, nobody is ever able to say that, so let's say, for example, that I downloaded your open textbook that had a CC license on it. What's your name? Patty? Oh, that's my mother's name. We're friends already. So if I took Patty's book, under no conditions am I allowed to say, and let's say I changed your book, I am not allowed to say Patty endorses my version of her book. The CC license is forbidden. If I want to say that, you and I have to have a side agreement that allows me to say it. The other protection that you have is that it's called non-attribution. If you want me to remove attribution back to you, you can tell me to do that, and I have to do it. Right? So if I create, you can't stop me from creating the derivative work that I want to create. But if you don't like it and you don't want your name on it, you can contact me and say, remove the attribution, and I have to comply. That's a right that you have in the license. So that's part of the answer. The other part of the answer, there's kind of two other parts. One is that the open education community is full of a bunch of good actors, and when something happens, which happens rarely, that somebody doesn't like, usually it's resolved very quickly. Usually it's just a misunderstanding or a mistake and it gets resolved. I've been at Creative Commons now for 7 years, and I've only seen probably 2 instances that required our intervention where we helped get to a resolution. But even those got resolved. So it just doesn't happen very much. And the third answer is that what you just laid out is not a copyright problem. If you published something that was all rights reserved copyright, and I wanted to paraphrase your work, I am fully able to do that under fair use permissions in the United States. And somebody in Canada could use fair dealing rights to do it. And I could completely distort your message and cite you in any way that I wanted to. And I'm allowed to do that, whether or not your work is openly licensed or not. And so a simple way to say this is, quote unquote, bad people are going to do bad things with your work, whether or not the work is open or closed. The good news is that when you openly license something, you tend to be sending a signal to a community that's going to do things with your work that you're happy about. Did that help? Okay. Last question. We're down to 1. Oh, nobody's claimed their book yet. There's still a book. Yes, question.
What materials are available for the online course, videos and a homework system model? You guys have a lot of that stuff?
What material? What OER is available?
Like video lesson?
Yeah. So that would be like the rest of the day to go over that. There are, let me point you just to a few resources, and then let me tell you what's coming. So today, unfortunately, the answer that I would have to give you is you need to go to Merlot. You should also go over to OpenStax and go to the Open Textbook Library and go over to Connections and look over here in India, their repository. And so I'm going to send you to, 15 different places. Go to the Khan Academy, right? I point you all over the place. And that's unfortunate because I just made search and discovery really hard for you. Now the good news is this is why we love librarians. Librarians step into that mix and say, no, don't look all those places. If you're in chemistry, we'll create you a LibGuide for where the good OER is for chemistry. So God bless the librarians. They solve this problem in many cases. So talk with your librarians. More and more libraries have OER librarians, which will actually help curate resources, or state consortia like Open Oregon that do a lot of this work for faculty. That's still not the optimal solution. At Creative Commons, we're trying to get to a simple one-stop place. And what we're doing is we're ripping apart our CC search. So Creative Commons has a search it's like Google, but it's just for openly licensed things and things that are in the public domain. Our search today is only a federated search. It points at a bunch of repositories and brings back results, but that's not good enough. What we're doing now is we're rebuilding CC search so it searches the entire commons. And by that I mean everything that's in the public domain and everything in the world that has a CC license on it. And then you'll be able to say in CC search, only show me images that have these licenses, and you'll be searching the world of images. It'll search, all the major museums, all of Flickr, all of the big image repositories. If you say, I only want to see, textbooks, if I only want to see videos, we'll subdivide the search for you. We're actually staffing up right now our tech team to build that out. So I would hope in a year's time I can come back and I can say, yes, here's CC search and you can search the world. We're not there yet. I know that's not a satisfactory answer, but that's kind of where we are. I think we're out of time. Yeah. Thank you.